Hi there, this is Matt with State of Flux here with a review for Avatar, The Way of Water. This is the much-awaited, long-awaited sequel to Avatar. 13 years it's been, as Voldemort once said. Was the wait worth it? I think largely yes. Certainly on a visual level, the aesthetic of this film is unparalleled. This is just like decidedly amazing looking movie. You will be hard pressed to find a better looking movie. Not only in its 3D, but just on its own. The cinematography of this film is stunning. But if you are to see this movie, certainly see the 3D. The 3D is the best use of 3D I've ever seen. It is the best 3D just in general. It works so well. And then the high frame rate that the film was shot in really works to the film's benefit. I know some people are complaining that it has like the motion smoothing kind of effect, they just didn't really get down with that. It worked for me. I really thought that aesthetically this film is fantastic. And like, if you listen to Cameron in any interview, honestly, he is always talking about the visual game that he's trying to bring to the table with this film. He's not talking about story, he's talking about the experience of the film and the thrill ride of seeing it on the big screen and all that stuff. So if the authorial intent is to deliver a spectacle for the ages that will dazzle you visually, he hit a home run. He hit more than a home run. He hit a grand slam. It is unparalleled, honestly, in its beauty. That said, if the first Avatar film was kind of criticized as being tropes the movie, he doubled the fuck down on that for this film. This film is just as tropey as the first one, but oddly enough uses completely different tropes. And I'll let you discover those for yourself through watching it. I don't want to get too much into the minutiae of some of my criticisms until towards the end of the review. This is a non-spoiler aspect of the review. I do think that the antagonist in this film was written a little lazy. And while we're on the screenplay, James Cameron has a very distinct way that he has his characters speak. Their dialogue is very... You can hear James Cameron words and stuff. He's really good at turning phrases and making phrases and the way people talk sound like catchphrases. Your hasta la vista, babies. Your I'll be backs. Get away from her, you be. That kind of thing. And like right down to the opening line of the first Avatar movie, when Jake Sully's like, the shot that blasted a hole through half of my life or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it is, but he has sort of aggressive use of language that's very vivid and impactful, even though it's also a bit on the nose and cartoony. Not out of place in like a comic book. That is the thing that this film is lacking. And it's not lost on me that this is a shared screenplay. Cameron takes top story credit and the top screenplay credit, but he wrote this with several other people. I think there's 5 additional names between story and screenplay that wrote it, and it just doesn't have the same ear for dialogue. And I feel like he certainly took what was written and polished it up, but I feel like he treated this kind of like George Lucas did with the Star Wars sequels, where he provided a story, a guide for Lawrence Kasdan to write The Empire Strikes Back. This feels much like Cameron did the same thing. Because the dialogue just doesn't grip you as well. The other thing that I feel as a criticism for this movie is that the main characters from the first movie kind of get lost in the shuffle, so much so that I don't really know who the main character of this film is. I guess it would be Jake and Neytiri's son, but even that is kind of a stretch because the film loses him at certain aspects of the movie, and then certain times you think the Sigourney Weaver character is going to be the main character, but then she kind of gets lost in the shuffle. It got to the point where there's so many characters, and it's not really so many, it's literally 6, but you're juggling between them, so much so that you don't have a focal point through which that we, the audience, are watching. Whereas the first movie was very focused on Jake is your avatar, which is why he's kind of blank slate man, the blank slate man guy, and Natiri, who is fun, lively, and engaging nonstop. And she is in this film as well. She's just underutilized, as was Jake, as were the 2 sons and the 2 daughters, and then the people that they meet along the way. I wanted more of a focused narrative with the characters, and I didn't necessarily get that. It's not so much Jake and Natiri's story anymore, it's the family story, and because of that we have we don't have a main character, we have a main family. And I've seen that done well in other films. It just didn't work 100% for me in this one. Lastly, I'm going to talk about the action. The action in this film is just like jaw-droppingly entertaining. Cameron always gets in 1 or 2 really good, like, wowza kind of hits where people will talk afterwards about the guy that hits the propeller in Titanic and stuff like that. There's several moments like that in this, and the action in the back half of this film is very reminiscent of a best of clip show of Cameron's work. You get stuff that's very reminiscent and evocative of Aliens or The Abyss, especially Titanic and T2, even True Lies to some extent, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I really appreciated that. He gave himself plenty of visual quotes, and I thought that was kind of neat and perfect for his own self-indulgence, which he's kind of known for. So there's that. I give Avatar: The Way of Water 3.5 out of 4 stars. Could it have been a better movie? Certainly, but what we got, what is delivered to us, is by no means bad. It is pure spectacle. You will have fun at this movie. It should touch you emotionally, especially the last half hour, which I think is the best half hour between the 2 movies, even though I did like largely the first movie more than I liked this one. It is just because a movie is riddled with tropes doesn't mean that those tropes aren't being put to the best use that they possibly can be. The first Avatar, my pushback with that, people who were saying that it was bad, look at the story, it's not anything to write home about, and it's like, no, the story is kind of tropey, it's stuff you've seen before, it's very Pocahontas or Fern Gully or whatever you want to compare it to, Dances with Wolves. But even if that's the case, Avatar is the best version of those movies that I've talked about. Avatar 2 operates under a lot of the same principles. Just because it's not stuff you haven't seen before, just because it isn't stuff you haven't seen before doesn't mean that it's outright bad. Just because a film is evocative of other works or contains tropes that you're familiar with doesn't mean it's bad. The tropes are there, but they're put to good use, and possibly even the best use I've seen of them. So that's where I land on this. I'm about to spoil the movie, so from here on out we're going to get spoilers. I'm not going to dive terribly deep, but we are going to go there in 3, 2, 1. This point forward, we are moving into spoilers. The thing I did not like with this film, and the thing that held me back for half the film's runtime from even giving the movie like a strong recommendation, is the villain. I thought it is an exercise in laziness to have the villain of the first film who is killed be the villain of this film. biologically it just didn't work for me. His character was dead. I don't see how he could be put into this avatar body. I'm, like, weirdly enough, that's the thing that I'm getting hung up on in this weird fantasy about an alien world where everything is bioluminescent and people can transpose their bodies into cat people. But as established with that first film, and through great lengths in this film as well, is that this is a real living environment. Everything is pumping with life, and the avatars, the Na'vi, are beings that can transpose their consciousness into the life around them, be it the trees, the grass, the horse things, the sea creatures, or whatever. And that's why I bought into the first movie. We essentially cloned them, humans cloned them, and could, using their own abilities, transpose a person's consciousness into their own avatar, not unlike a video game. And we're following Jake Sully through video game land. All that I kind of buy. It seemed there was an organic way to weave all that story in, biologically organic, and it worked for me. But then you have Stephen Lang, the villain of the first film, in a recording prior to his character's death, saying, "I uploaded my consciousness into this here chip, and this here chip is going to be uploaded into my avatar. So if you're watching this, I already died. Let that motivate you." And it becomes a revenge plot from that point forward. My understanding wasn't that, like, they're downloading their consciousness onto a chip and putting that into the avatar body. I thought it was kind of like tethering the tail to the horse, or tethering the tail to each other. Like a similar thing. His consciousness was going into that, which is how he could kind of dip back and forth between, and now he has no physical presence anymore, the Stephen Lang character. So that just didn't work for me. Now, I say that with a but. I felt it was lazy writing to have the same villain of your first film be your villain of the second film. I said that's lazy writing. The last time I made that exact same complaint was when I saw Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I saw the first 2 movies before I read the books. And when I walked out of the second one, I was like, you know, it's not a half-bad movie, but are we really going to beat the same drum over and over, the same drum beat over and over again, by having the same villain? That's tired, and it's, my only criticism of Chamber of Secrets at the time was that aspect of the movie. The redundancy of having, and laziness of having Voldemort be the villain of not only the first story, but also the second story. Now, as that story unfolded and I got to see where Voldemort went and the richness of character that is provided through backstory throughout the rest of the Harry Potter works, it grew on me. And I love it. So maybe that will happen here too. Maybe this will, I will get to a point where I appreciate that, the character that was killed in the first Avatar. But as of now, I do stand that it is somewhat lazy writing. The other thing was, I was incredibly, I found Sigourney Weaver's character incredibly compelling. And I wanted more of her. And she seems to be the focal point at times, but then around the middle of the movie, she kind of just fades into the background and then is almost obscured or relegated to damsel in distress mode throughout the last quarter of the movie. And then at the very end, you don't really have any emotional payoff with what she accomplishes with her superpowers and stuff that she's presented. Maybe that's just being left for the dish that will be Avatar 3, but as of now, I feel like it's a misstep. That was your story. That's where your motivation lay. Why are we not focusing more on her? this film lacked a true genuine main character, and she was it, and you didn't capitalize on that. Instead, you gave us a relatively complex middle-aged son, and like, he was interesting, but nowhere near as interesting as her. And then, like, the oldest son is kind of just like afterthought guy that's just there to give you the feels when he's not there. And that his death worked for me, but it's strange. For as grand of spectacle as this film is, it feels a lot more compressed than the first movie. The first movie had a scope larger than this one, and a weight to it that seems more like just huge, I guess. It felt like a world at war. This feels like a much more personal story, which of course it is. You're relegated to man seeking vengeance over family of 6. And if anybody gets in the way, so be it. And while that's interesting, I kind of walked out of the movie feeling like it should have been grander. And I had that feeling once before too with Avengers: Age of Ultron. The first one feels so big and grand in scope, and the second one is a much more personal story. You have big action set pieces, probably even bigger than the first movies, but it doesn't feel as big. And I think that's where this film was struggling as well. But I've sort of talked my points. What did you think of the movie? I do land that this is a very good movie. Especially the last half hour works very well. The action is great, and the spectacle of it all is just jaw-dropping. This is a great-looking movie. Certainly a shoe-in for visual effects and cinematography and stuff like that, as it should be. It's great-looking. And it has me excited to see the next installment. And maybe my ideas of this film will shift by then because of that film. So time will tell. Hopefully it comes out within the next 2 years as planned. But anyway, what did you think of Avatar: The Way of Water? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and peace.